The Sound has been a vital part of the Cape landscape for a long time, and efforts to preserve it aren't new to this decade. I sat down recently with Peter Borelli, Executive Director of the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, to get his perspective and to look back at past efforts to protect Nantucket Sound. I think a lot of people wonder, why is Nantucket Sound any different than any other part of the East Coast? One really interesting way to look at Nantucket Sound is that it's a water body that's almost completely surrounded by land. And if it weren't for I think it's about 1.25 miles between Monomoy and Great Point on Nantucket, that it would be pretty much an enclosed body of water with all state water.
There was a great deal of local and statewide concern about some of our offshore waters, and in early 1970s, legislation was passed that set aside certain areas in the state as what are called ocean sanctuaries, Massachusetts ocean sanctuaries. And one of those sanctuaries was Nantucket Sound. Right, yeah. And when I say Nantucket Sound, I'm referring to the area that most people, even probably today, view as Nantucket Sound, namely all of the waters from the Cape out to the islands. Sure. And it's only recently that the general public came to understand that, in point of fact, what they see, the water sheet spreading out to the islands, is in fact a very complicated jurisdiction, and that the middle of the sound is actually federal waters and not state waters. That came about as a result of a poorly argued lawsuit between the federal government and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the mid-'80s. Massachusetts lost its claim on all of Nantucket Sound, which had been the understanding throughout the Commonwealth, through all of the 20th century until the 80s. It was the assumption when the ocean sanctuary was created that all of the waters seaward of the state boundary was included in the Sound, and that I think that's significant. The use and the economy and the history of Nantucket Sound has all revolved around it as a open body of water, protected resource. And it was for that reason that in 1980, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts nominated the entire Sound as a national marine sanctuary. And in that nomination, then Attorney General Bellotti, in effect said, and he was decades ahead of his time, when he in effect said, you know, it really doesn't matter who owns it, it's how we manage it. So what Bellotti was in effect saying at the time was, it makes no difference where the state line ends, it makes no difference where the federal jurisdiction begins. Why don't we, the state and the federal government, manage it as a whole for the following reasons: for the protection of the fishery, for the maintenance of it as an economic tourism resource, for the important transportation that it provides back from, and so we have these very vital transportation links to the islands, and for its aesthetic beauty. And those were the declared, in effect, the declared policies of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The National Marine Sanctuary Program was created by law in the 70s, but it wasn't until well into the late 80s that any actual sanctuaries were created. The very first sanctuary in the Northeast was actually nominated, was the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary, was nominated by the Center for Coastal Studies. Basically, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration said, and Congress put a cap on the sanctuary program. So it's not that Nantucket Sound was ever actually rejected.
Right.
It was that we still haven't gotten to the second round of nominations.
What is the current situation, and what are some of the impacts of having this split in responsibility between the state out to 3 miles from the edge of the shore out to 3 miles and the federal government in the middle?
Chaos. I mean, you can't manage an ecosystem in pieces. Mm-hmm. And by having a fragmented governmental administration, it's unmanageable. It's vitally important that every major body of water in the Commonwealth have an organization that is focused on it. We now have one in Buzzards Bay, the Coalition for Buzzards Bay, Nantucket Sound. There's an active group in Boston Harbor, Save the Harbor, Save the Bay. Mm-hmm. And there need to be these groups everywhere. Yep. And it's only a concerned and active citizenry that is going to help shape the kinds of policies that I think are long overdue.